Hello weirdos, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma Abe, and today we are going to be doing a video all about all the books that I read in May. So that's exciting. I believe I read a total of 12. I'm not 100% on that number. So let's get started. The first book I read in May is The Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and this won the memoir category of the Goodreads Choice Awards, and that is why I read it. My feelings about it are that I'm not the correct person to be reading this book. You think I would be, because I fall into most of the perceived demographics. However, I just really wasn't on board with all of the pseudo-religious-y stuff. I don't want to call it crap because people have feelings about that. But yeah, I just wasn't on board with it. I didn't connect to that. And I understand that's like a personal preference kind of thing. And yeah, this memoir has been kind of lauded as this transformational memoir. And I could see why people would feel that way about it. I just didn't. Like, I would agree with Glennon, Miss Doyle, but at the same time, I would just be like, but I don't care. I mean, I will say good on her for living her truth. I just don't connect with a lot of the, like, pent-up Christian bullshit. Yeah, that's basically how I feel about it. I am glad that some people liked it, but there's just some parts, especially when he's talking about the knowing, that I was just like a little bit like, okay, but what if this knowing is telling you to move in a financial decision for your company wise that literally does not make any sense? The way that she put all of this trust, implicit trust, into the knowing and actively encouraged other people to do that really, really set me off. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it. This book was not for me. I wanted to like it because the cover is super fun. I just didn't. There you go. So that one I think got 3 stars. I don't remember. The next book I read, because I can speak, is An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. And I didn't like this one either. I do think I'm going to be giving this copy away. This is a copy that I got for free about last year, and I think that somebody else would just enjoy this, and I do not want this in my home anymore. Basically, you're following this boy, Colin. I found him insufferable. I didn't like him at all, and I did not like his best friend, Hassan. I felt that Colin felt very much entitled the whole book. I did not like him. I did not like the way he talked about his past girlfriends, the past Catherines. Yeah, I found him very, very insufferable, and I did not enjoy learning about him at all, and didn't really care about his growth. His best friend Hassan is another person that I did not care for different reasons. A lot of it wasn't necessarily so much about him, but how he was handled / written. Colin is an atheist, and they make that very clear. They explicitly say that, and Hassan is a Muslim, which there is nothing wrong with either of those two positions. However, I found it increasingly frustrated because at least once that I remember, I did not take note of it. At least once Hassan tries to actively push Colin to converting to Islam, and I find that extremely frustrating as someone who has been put on the receiving end of stuff like that. I hate it. And that's just a personal thing of mine. I'm very it's very knee-jerk reaction I have to people trying to convert me into anything or trying to sell me on something that is less than scientifically reliable. I'll say that. And I just felt like, in that retrospect, Hassan was being a really crappy friend, because if you are a good friend to someone, you won't try to convert them to another religion, even though they have explicitly told you multiple times that that is not what they believe and they are not interested in that. I really did not like that. It is kind of, from what I'm remembering, played off as a little bit jokey. Still did not think it was okay. Also, Hassan is on the heavier side, overweight. I don't really know what the correct word to say is. And there's just all the fat jokes in this book, and I did not like that. I don't really know what else to say about that. Yeah, wasn't super into it. Also, I thought the plot was kind of really boring. I really didn't care about Colin's stupid theorem about Catherine's. I think that the idea of trying to create a predictive model as to whether a relationship is going to fail or not is too complicated. Even though Colin does have a lot of data points, it's just too complicated to actually work out. Anyway, that's this one. I'm not going to talk about it any longer because otherwise I'll just get mad. Next book I read is The Next Great Migration. This is by Sonnen Shah. This is a book that I had to read for the Booktube prize, and I've already read it, and the Booktube prize video is out, so if you want to know more about my thoughts about this one, go there. Spoilers, I did wind up ranking it 5th out of 6th, and it did not continue on to the next round. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Luckily, that is the only Booktube prize book that I read. The next book is The Stand by Stephen King. This book I had been nursing for a while, for over a month by the time I finished it. And I so deeply wanted to love it. I really, really liked the first third where the contagion and the virus is spreading. I really connected with that part, even though I wasn't reading it during that point in time during the pandemic. I still really liked it. I loved seeing the chaos and the fear. I think that that can be quite cathartic, especially going through the chaos that we are going through right now. However, also, why I read this because my dad recommended it to me, because he's super into like horror, and he was like, oh my gosh, like The Stand, pandemic, we're in a pan pizza. And so that's why I read it. So I really liked that. I think Stephen King is really, really good at building all of these characters. Oh my gosh. Yes, sometimes I did feel like it dragged. However, Stephen King does a really good job of making a world feel lived in, building a world, essentially. I really enjoyed that part of it as well. However, where he lost me was when the introduction of like all of these weird dreams started happening. I was kind of like, what? And then additionally, they have like the dark man versus like the old lady. I was not on board. It lost me there. I'm like, there's a lot of horror in just the nature of society falls apart. There doesn't need to be this big epic build up to a good versus evil. You can have that without this whole dark man bullshit. Yeah, and I didn't like that. Trying to think what else. Also, I thought the climax was incredibly boring. I was just like, wait, did they just end it like that? Like, that was kind of boring. Oh, another thing I don't like, and this is just something that I felt like I've learned. Sex scenes written by white men make me feel so uncomfortable. I am sorry. Like, it's not that I don't like sex scenes in books. I can read and enjoy sex scenes in book, but there's something that is so inherently icky and exploitative, I feel like, that comes across when men, white men, particularly straight white men especially, write sex scenes. And I don't know if it's just me coming from as a queer individual, like, not a fun time. I do not enjoy it. And that's not necessarily like a criticism of like the book in general. That's just something I realized while reading this book. Another thing I didn't like is I liked the way it ended if you cut off the last 2 pages, which is like the last chapter. I do like the idea that Stephen King was going with the whole idea of the perpetual cycle. I really liked that. And I don't want to spoil it. However, it felt so gross. For the single reason, it just had all of the undertones and, quite frankly, overtones of colonialism. And that felt nasty. I did not like that. I was reading that and I was like, wow, that was real racist. Like, that was very, very concerning. And I don't want to go into more detail about it. I'm sure you could go and talk to a creator of color and they could tell you more specifically about it, but I just don't want to go more into it because of spoilers, and I just don't care enough. So if I was ever to revisit this book again, I probably would only want to read the first third, because that's where the chaos and the fear and the anxiety and just horror of people trying to put a lid and keep it from spreading. And yeah, there's real good imagery, real good nasty imagery in this. But yeah, I could not love it. I could not. So, okay. Next is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I feel like most of these books I've been reading so far have been duds. Because they have. And Anxious People is no exception to that rule. I don't know what it was about this book, but I just did not like it. It did not gel with me. I don't know if it was just the writing style or not. I just didn't give a shit. That was my entire experience of reading this book. I read this because I think it won like the runner-up for fiction, I think, for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I was just sitting there, and I understand why people love it. Frederick Bachman can write well enough to where you're supposed to feel emotions at certain points in the story. I just did not feel those emotions at those certain points. And I don't know if it was just the writing style in particular that set me off. It just kind of felt odd. That was just my experience. Wasn't super fun. Next book is It Broke the Trend, and that is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Cafeteria? This is by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. This I picked up almost 2 years ago. I'm so glad I read it. I think there's a lot to say about race. Obviously, it's a book all about race. I really like the examinations of what it means to be biracial. That whole chapter I found to be particularly insightful. I loved that it tackled not only Black, white racism, but it talked about all the different kinds of racism. This is like a sociology book, and this is a reprinted edition in 2016. This was reprinted, and it was originally written 97. So this book continues to be relevant, and I don't know when it won't be relevant, but what I really loved is that, and most good sociology anthropology books will do this, she takes straight from case studies and uses statistics, and I loved it. And I think if you're looking to pick up another book about race and you like stuff about sociology, this is a good one to pick up. I loved it. It's probably one of the best things I've read this month. The next book is a book that I read with my eyeballs, and that is History Makers. This is by Ian Whitelaw and Judy Whitaker, and it says on the cover, rated in order, using a unique mathematical formula. In the whatever section of the book where they explain this mathematical formula, they essentially tell you the mathematical formula is essentially horseshit, and it could change based on any given day. It's not that it's horseshit in terms of like they made up the rankings. They did make a formula. However, they acknowledged that depending on like events that are happening and Google searches, because that's a lot of what the formula is based off. It's based off of like traffic, internet traffic based on a person's name, that could skew and change the results. And I thought that was very, very frank, because you have like number 2 on the list, Henry Ford. Like, excuse me, what? Some of the rankings for some of the peoples was a little bit sus. But again, the mathematical formula is the mathematical formula. I felt about this book overall, I felt just kind of meh about it. Like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't necessarily good. They take 100 different people from the 20th century, and they do little mini biographies on them. I was a little bit irritated because some entries were only given 2 pages and some entries were given 4. Most of the people were only given 2 entries. So if you look at Mussolini's, he gets 2 pages. However, if we look at Henry Ford, he gets 4 pages. That kind of irritated me a little bit, because I think that, like, if you're going to do 4 pages, do 4 pages for everybody, keep it consistent. I understand that it's really hard to condense a person's life into 2 pages, essentially. However, I was just like, well, some of the people, especially people like Henry Ford, like, did not need 4 pages. It's a nitpicky thing, but that's just how I felt. There are some people that I'd never heard of before, and some that I would be interested in reading more about. Some of the like interesting factoids that they include, because they include like some like interesting factoids in this rewriting history, they can be kind of obvious, especially if you know about the different people. It is what it is, you know. Yeah, I yeah. I have no more feelings about that one. Okay, the next book is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the runner-up for, I want to say, a YA award of some sort on the Goodreads Choice Awards. I'm going to be honest, I was not looking forward to reading this book. However, I will say Suzanne Collins can write a compelling story. I wanted to see how it ended, especially when we are in the Hunger Games portion of it. I was just flipping through the book really, really fast. I kept wanting to see what was going to happen. I didn't love the book. Some of the parts made it frustrating. I found frustrating. I think if you're going to show us a villain fall into their depravity, show us that. You know, don't act as if he's all innocent, and he really kind of isn't. However, I wanted to see more of his like manipulations. I wanted to see him really manipulating and using Lucy Gray. I did not jam with the romance part of this at all. Cornelius Snow really feels like the kind of person that would not even bother with love in search for his climb to the top to power. I just have a lot of feelings about this book and just lots of frustrations in general. So I thought that the first, I want to say 2/3 of the book were pretty good and like kept things going, because that's all like the game aspect. And I like that not everything with the games was all figured out at the beginning, and I liked that they kind of changed over time. That was cool. I felt like it got really freaking slow when Coriolanus Snow went to District 12. I did not care. I felt like the plot kind of ground to a halt, and we were introducing ourselves to all these characters that didn't really wind up mattering in the end. I felt like that could have been completely cut out, and there could have been some other way to have that like emotional kick in the guts that we wanted. I do like how freaking manipulative Snow is with the parents of his friend. That I felt was like fucking perfect. I liked that. I loved the dean. I forget her name. I loved how fucking deliciously twisted she was. And I just wanted more like deliciously twistedness in this book. Another thing, nitpick. This is totally a nitpick. One of the characters dies of rabies, and it was kind of over like in 2 pages, and I was like, no, rabies is such a terrifying like disease, and I don't know if it's just me, if it's my thing with like rabies, but like she could have like really, really showed like how fucking terrifying it is, how horrifying it was, rather than it just being one way to off another one of the contestants. Missed opportunity. Oh well, and it's definitely a me thing. It felt really weird at the end when Snow is just proclaiming that he wants to be president. It definitely felt like Snow was trying to keep his head above water, tried to keep up all of these pretenses throughout most of the book. And that was really where like the focus and the energy was. It was more of upholding the Snow name rather than I really, really want this political power. It almost felt like something that he didn't really want for most of the book, or really had no concrete ambitions for. And I don't think the transition from that at the beginning to wanting that power when he says that, don't think that made much sense. Yeah, so that felt really jarring in the end for me. Basic plot of this book, I'm sure most people know, but we're following Coriolanus Snow. It's prequels. There's Hunger Games, and there's a girl from District 12 that he has to mentor, and that's really what you're following. Spoilers, there's romance between him and the girl from District 12 that he mentors, and Was not on board. Was not on board. Okay. Next book, this is Dearly. This is by Margaret Atwood. This won the Poetry Award for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And yeah, poetry, not my thing. There were poems in this that I did enjoy, especially the poems regarding like women's bodies and autonomy and that kind of stuff. Maybe that's just because that's like a subject that I really gravitate towards. But otherwise I felt just kind of apathetic towards it. I don't think it's really fair for me to give it more of a rating than that, just because poetry's not my thing. I don't really have much else to say about it. The next book is Waiting on a Bright Moon by Noon Yang. This is a ebook that I have. It's a short story. It is 40 pages long. It is like this fantasy, like futuristic fantasy, lesbian stories, with lots of Chinese culture. And I loved it. I loved it for that setting. However, I don't the problem. It's a short story. I'm not very used to reading short stories. I didn't feel like I could connect to a lot of the characters for the sole reason of we didn't get to spend enough time with them. And I tried to stretch this out over a couple of days, but ultimately I think I just wanted more. I think there's a huge story and lots of like angles that you could discuss about like trauma and just what it is like to be queer in the society. And I felt like so much more could have been done, and I wanted more, plain and simple, than I got. I'm excited to read more of Noon Yang's stuff, because I will, and I plan to. Next book I read was If It Bleeds by Stephen King. Quite frankly, this is a short story collection. It's like got like 4 different stories in it. I felt like most of them were boring. I don't really know what else to say. I'm trying to remember what all of them were. The first one was How to Phone. That one I thought was fine. The next one was the one about like the world dying, and it's told like backwards. And my biggest issue with that one is there's implying that there is a connection between this person and the universe ending. And that connection wasn't explained. It wasn't even like touched on. Like, why? I wanted answers, and I was waiting to the last like part to get those answers, and that last part gave me 0 answers, and I just was like, I felt like I wasted my time. Then the next one is If It Bleeds, which is honestly like that one I think was like the scariest out of all of them, just because it's about these like pain sucking creatures who can change their skins and like never die. That's interesting. I thought that was interesting, and I kind of liked where it went. The last one I think was Rat, and I didn't like Rat. I think Stephen King does a lot of self-inserts, and Rat is about a struggling writer who's looking for inspiration, winds up making this deal with this rat. Yeah, and I didn't care. Plain and simple. That's that one. All right, so the last book I read was Empress Dowager Cixi. This is by Zhang Cheng, and I read this for the Asian Readathon. I didn't do too well at reading all the books for the Asian Readathon. This one and Waiting on a Bright Moon was the only 2 I managed to get read, but this one I thoroughly loved. I know I like Zhang Cheng's writing. That's just one thing that I know about myself. I cannot wait to get to more of her books. Yeah, I felt like the attention that Zhang Cheng paid to explaining cultural things was great. I loved how she wrote, and how she kind of explained, hey, here is where there might be some gray area because of X, Y, and Z. I loved that. And I just think that Empress Dowager Cixi is a remarkably smart woman. I think the political maneuvering that she did in order to keep hold of power for so long was so interesting. This was, again, probably one of the favorite books I read this past month. Check it out if you're at all interested. Very happy with that one. And that is it. That is all the books that I read in May. June is going a little bit slower. Taking longer to read books. That is it. Leave me a like, comment comment something. What was the favorite book that you read in May? All right, and I will leave because I want to go to bed. Bye.